Wizards, the most quintessential of classes, been in the game since its very inception and so ubiquitous in fantasy fiction, we're almost overwhelmed by options. But we need to choose one that we can create in D&D for this video. But who do we choose? Well, first of all, we need to decide amongst ourselves, what is it that makes a D&D wizard? You think wizard, you think magic, you think pointy hat, you think robes. Like Gandalf. Look at him. Perfect wizard archetype right there. Except, well, if we're being technical about it, in the world of Lord of the Rings, Gandalf is a Mayor of Valinor, basically the in-universe equivalent of an angel, and his powers come directly from Eru Ilúvatar or God. So if we're being technical, he's more of a cleric than a wizard, given the source of his magic. In D&D, magic comes from learning, from books, and so we need to add another criterion to our list. Magic, pointy hat, robes, learned magic at school. Like Rincewind from Terry Pratchett's Discworld series. I mean, he absolutely went to school, Unseen University in Ankh-Morpork, and although he flunked out, yes, he did manage to learn a singular spell, which accidentally lodged itself in his brain. But that's not going to work either. I mean, he only knows one spell, and we don't see him doing anything magical other than this, apart from the seemingly miraculous way that he survived certain death. No, in D&D, wizards have spells, plural. All the spells. We need to add another criterion here. Magic, pointy hat, robes, learned at school, knows a lot of spells. Like Harry Potter, the boy wizard himself. I mean, he certainly knows a lot of spells, doesn't he? Except, that's not going to work either. Wizards in D&D need high intelligence, and, well, Harry's not stupid exactly, but would you give this guy a 20 in intelligence? Plus, D&D wizards need a spellbook, a powerful magic tome from which they get all of their spells, and Harry here spent the first few years of his life living in a cupboard under the stairs. He's never read a book in his life. And so we need to look again. Pointy hat, robes, went to school, knows lots of spells, high intelligence, magical book. And, well, when you boil it all down like that, we're really only left with one option. Elphaba, the villain from Wizard of Oz and the anti-hero from Wicked. Now, straight up, I need to confess something. Even though I am showing footage here from Wicked the movie, I have not actually seen it. It is on my to-do list, I just haven't got around to it. But I have seen the musical, and I have seen Wizard of Oz, and I have read the books, and so I feel safe in saying I do know this character pretty well, but this is a disclaimer here in case I say something that contradicts the movie, or if I mispronounce one of their names because I've only ever seen them written down and I'm going from that as my source material. And also, it is very possible I am going to spoil part 2 of the movie if you haven't seen it. I have no idea if I am or not, but if I do, it is by accident, I assure you. Like I said, I haven't seen part 1 yet. But you have been warned. So let's get building. So as always, we're going to build Elphaba here at level 9, and we're going to create her twice. Once using the old 2014 version of the rules, and again using the newly launched 2024 edition. And this is an important thing to note because it's something a few of my viewers didn't seem to get, judging by your comments, because ideally, Elphaba would be a Hexblood as her race because she is a hag, and her subclass should be Transmutation Wizard because the bulk of her magic involves transforming people in one way or another. But here's the kicker, the 2024 edition of the rules, they've only just launched, so there is no Hexblood race to choose from, and there is no Transmutation Wizard subclass to choose from. So if I build her in this way in 2014, I can't make a good comparison between them when I go to 2024. So I have to make choices that exist in both editions. And for this, therefore, I am going to make her instead an Abjuration Wizard, since one of the main reasons why Elphaba casts magic is to protect the people that she loves. She protects the love of her life from being attacked by a mob, she protects Bok from having his heart shrunk, she protects her sister by helping her walk again. Really, these things are achieved through transmutation, yes, but whatever, it is for protection that she's casting magic, so she is an Abjuration Wizard. And as for race, well, I'm going to have to choose something a little out of left field here too, because if we consider that Elphaba is born in Munchkin land to a Munchkin mother, and if we consider that Munchkins are essentially Oz's version of halflings, Oh, and if we also consider that her father is a human, well then of course it makes sense that Elphaba is going to be a tiefling. No, she doesn't have red skin, she doesn't have horns, but what she does have is a curse in her blood that makes her look fundamentally different to those around her. And people shun her and fear her in-world because of her looks. They don't judge her on a character, they alienate her, they cut her out because they are afraid of who she is and the curse that is in her blood. And if that doesn't say tiefling to you, then hey, you don't know tieflings. So we're building a wizard here, so she gets 2 proficiencies out of the gate. We're going to go with Arcana for her magical schooling and Insight for her ability to see through the Wizard of Oz's charms where no one else could. Otherwise, we don't get a lot of choices to make as a wizard. We get 2 feats to choose from at level 4 and level 8. At 4, we're going to go with Keen Mind, because she has one, and we're going to go with Skill Expert at level 8 because honestly wizards don't get a lot of proficiencies, and I feel Elphaba deserves one in history due to her goat professor specifically lore dumping history to her, and we get an expertise in Arcana because she's the only person that can read the magical grimoire that she finds. For background, I'm going to make her a scribe to go along with her scholarly background. Finally, spells, and well, since she finds this spell book preloaded with a bunch of magic, I'm not gonna faff about here. I'm just gonna say she has access to every single spell in the game. Yes, this does mean she has a ton of ritual cast spells that she can do at a moment's notice. It does make sense. Usually when we see her casting spells, she is reading from the book, ritual casting. But what does she have prepared at a moment's notice? What spells from this spellbook has she prepared at the beginning of today? Well, let's have a look at what we see Elphaba do across the movies, and we will choose these as her spells. So, in A Wizard of Oz, we see her vanishing in a puff of smoke, Dimension Door. We see her flying on a broomstick, Fly. We see her observing Dorothy through a magical portal, Scrying. We see her summoning a horde of winged monkeys, Conjure minor elementals, I guess. We see her very presence terrifying those around her, cause fear. And we see her melt when water gets thrown on her, which we later learn in Wicked. Actually, I'm pretty sure this is a spoiler, so look away now if you don't want to be spoiled on part 2 of the movie, and I'm just going to flash it on the screen without talking over it. Okay, there we go. So in Wicked, as already mentioned, most of what Elphaba does is transmutation magic. When a mob of people attacks Fiyero, she turns him into a scarecrow so he doesn't get hurt. Polymorph. She also protects him from fire at one point, protection from energy. She casts a spell on the ruby slippers, yes they are ruby, not silver, to make them move by themselves and her sister able to walk, animate objects. Her sister then takes the book and uses it to make Bok fall in love with her. Charm person. Finally, she's able to hide away from people and not be found for a large chunks of the second half of the book, non-detection. So after all is said and done, this is our 2014 version of Elphaba. High intelligence, pretty good constitution, wisdom and dexterity, trash everywhere else. Quite a typical build, to be honest, for a wizard, but in the same time a bit unusual because of this choice of spells. I mean, she doesn't have a lot of destructive magic here, which is I think what most people tend to associate the wizard class with, and she has very few spells at levels 1 and 2, but yeah, I mean, she's okay. I think probably her biggest letdown is her lack of abjuration magic, because the whole point of the Abjura subclass is that once per long rest, when she casts an abjuration spell, she can create an arcane ward, essentially a pool of temporary hit points that she can use to either protect herself or at a higher level, an ally within 30 feet. Now, as things stand, Elphaba only has one abjuration spell prepared, protection from energy, meaning she's going to be quite predictable in battle. Basically, during combat, she'll spend her first turn throwing up protection from energy on herself, which then triggers her arcane ward, and then she'll just kind of sit at the back throwing magic around and using spells like Fly and Dimension Door to stay out of harm's way. Although not even that, since she doesn't have a lot of destructive magic. I mean, give her Fireball or something and we'd be cooking, but we don't see Elphaba do that sort of magic, and so she doesn't have it. Now, in this sense, the 2024 version is slightly better, not because of any of the core features that it gives us. To be honest, On the surface, the wizard seems to be one of the least modified classes in the game, but the Abjura subclass now forces you to have Dispel Magic and Counterspell prepared at all times. And even though we don't see Elphaba doing either of these spells in the source material, because we're forced to take them, at the very least this does give her options. But other than this, as I say, there aren't a lot of changes between the 2014 and 2024 versions. I mean, the level at which things happen has changed slightly. We get our subclass at level 3 now instead of level 2, but the features themselves are basically the same. We still get Arcane Ward, which functions pretty much the same as before. We still get Arcane Recovery, which functions pretty much the same as before. The spells themselves have changed slightly in the newer edition, but not enough to really quibble over. For all intents and purposes, these characters are the same. She just gets a bit more now. More mandatory spells, an additional cantrip, an additional expertise, a ton of additional proficiencies thanks to her origin feat Skilled. But how much do these really improve a character overall? And so, as we pull up our scale of power, how do the two versions compare? They are basically the same. But that's not a bad thing. This chart is not meant to be seen as a tier list or a power list showing how good these classes are relative to each other. It is simply judging which classes are the most changed relative to the previous edition. In the 2014 version of the game, Wizard was one of the strongest classes in the game, and in the 2024 version, Wizard is still one of the strongest classes in the game. They haven't been nerfed, it's just that they haven't really been buffed either. They are unchanged. Is the 2024 version more powerful? Yes, but you know what? A lot of the classes are more powerful in 2024 in terms of their raw numbers, the number of proficiencies they get, the number of spells they get, and so on and so on. And presumably, a lot of the monsters are going to be more powerful too when they get released. Now, with this scale, what's more interesting to me is to see how do characters play on the battlefield. Like, when the DM turns to you and he says, hey, you're up next in the initiative order, and you look down at your character sheet, are the options that you have available to you better or worse than they were in the previous edition? For Monk, Druid and Warlock here, you can easily see that their core mechanics are much improved now, so much so it's going to have a major impact on decisions that you make in the game. But for the Wizard, I mean, it used to be in the previous edition that it would come to your turn and you would cast a spell, and it still is the case that it comes to your turn in the initiative order and you cast a spell. The spells themselves might have been tweaked slightly, but the core class itself and how it plays hasn't. But that's not a bad thing. And so I feel happy putting Wizard right here in the middle of our scale, unchanged and solid as a rock as the rest of the metagame swirls around them. And so that's all for this week. Please, if you've watched this to the end, do consider dropping a like and commenting below. And with that said, join us next time when we're going to be taking on Ranger, the red-headed stepchild of the D&D world. I can't wait to see how this one turns out. Until then, I hope you all had a lovely Christmas break and a new year. And yeah, I will see you next week. Do take care.